Today, we're going to be talking about one of the most requested topics that we've had over the last couple of months is how to get our lapsed donors back. And for those of you who have not had this on forefront of the mind, why is this important? Was looking up a bunch of data in preparation for this session about, what does it cost to get a donor, versus new donor versus reacquire. Some of the Blackbaud data said it costs 5 to 7 times. We saw research from Bloomberg that said up to 10 times as expensive to acquire a new donor than just to keep our existing ones happy. And we'll have some strategies on how to retain donors in this presentation so that we're not having to reacquire donors all the time to kind of keep them in the pipeline, keep them consistent. So we will touch on that towards the end. But if we are in the situation where we've had people who've given in the past and then have stopped giving for whatever reason, that's what we're going to talk about today. So feel free to jump in as you have questions. No need to hold them till the end. And feel free to also use that chat box if you don't want to interrupt, and I can get to those questions as we go. One thing of note is that as of last year, we are under 50% in terms of charities nationally in terms of donor retention. So I think it's right at 48% of donors who gave to a specific charity gave to that charity again. So our donor retention rates are not good nationally overall. Hopefully our clients can be a little better than that. But in terms of your average charity, if you were to compare that to, say, a business, and if Starbucks lost 48% of their customers annually, they'd be bankrupt pretty quick. So hopefully some efforts and some ideas and some strategies today to prevent that and try to get our numbers up into that 60, 70, 80, even 90% retention. To start, kind of identify first, where do our donors go? So they're not gone necessarily. So if they've given once and they don't give a second time, or they've given for years and they stop giving, what are the typical reasons that they are no longer engaging with us? The first and most common is that they've replaced us. People who are philanthropic tend to be philanthropic by nature. They're not going to not give to charity. Or most people who are philanthropic by nature and are used to giving have budgeted an amount each year for annual giving that goes to a variety of charities. And if there are charities that seem like they have better causes or just engage with them a little bit better, they certainly will move on to something else. The donors, especially nowadays, the most important reason for keeping giving is to feel like their gift is impactful. So that we know top of the list, of course, is demonstrating impact after a gift is made, keeping a donor informed. But if we don't do those things, we know that they're not going to not give. They're just going to give to someone else, a different nonprofit. The next is that they're upset with us for some reason, and we'll have some specific strategies on how to compensate and try to move past that. But oftentimes you kind of get the silent treatment. Well, I'm not giving to them anymore. And you don't even know why necessarily, because if they're not giving you feedback, it's hard to know why they might be upset with. It might not even be you. It might be something that your board did or something that your executive leadership, a decision that they've made. But it's important to keep those communication channels open so that we can avoid that as much as we can. The second is that they've moved away from us. We see time and time again that the most large and transformational gifts tend to be perceptively those that stay in the quote unquote community. So if someone's going to give big, they want that money, they want those dollars to stay local. It's why you don't see the average gift size for United Way, Red Cross, American Cancer Society, St. Jude, all of these wonderful charities who do great work globally as well as domestically, tend not to get lots and lots of big gifts. They kind of focus on the kind of mass marketing, mass fundraising strategies because that's the size of gift they tend to get. Most people who give want to see their dollars stay local and improve their own community. They're being generous, but they also want to live in a place that has good healthcare, that has good schools, that has great social services, and is desirable to stay for their friends and family and their community. So a lot of times we find that the donor wasn't upset at all, and they're not giving to another charity because they're doing a better job of communicating, but they moved to a new state and they want to find and engage with a nonprofit that's somewhere there that's going to serve their local community a little bit better. The next most common is that they've forgotten us. And this one is a little bit more on us as the charity for sure. If we're not sending them regular updates about where their gift is being spent, some of the wonderful things that we're doing, they may not be necessarily upset or replaced us or anything like that. They just may have thought, you know what, I haven't thought about the so-and-so or foundation in years. I used to give to them and then I stopped hearing from them, and it totally didn't even cross my mind. I totally spaced it. And again, a little bit more on us, but at that point, we know we could say, okay, as long as we're delivering information, we can get around that. And the last is that they're waiting on us. This one is often the case. Last year, 60% of donors in this country said they would have given more if asked. But they're like, well, they didn't ask me for any more money, so I guess they didn't need it. You know, if they wanted a check for something, they always come to me and tell me what they need and how much they need and what it's going to be spent on. They didn't ask me last year, so I think they must be okay. And we're thinking, why didn't they contact us? They always give us a gift. It's like, well, we've reached out to them every single year. We've been the person who does the first point of contact, and suddenly we don't do that. And they're going, well, I guess we don't need the money. And that's an easy one to recoup, but we have to make sure that we're actually making that ask in between the stewardship and cultivation. So that said, how do we earn back their love and money? Because those two really go hand in hand. You're not going to have an ongoing relationship with a donor that is financial only, and you're not going to have an ongoing relationship with a constituent who probably isn't inclined to give. So those things, because they're so closely intertwined, we have to focus on that relationship building. Obviously, we know this as fundraisers, but how do we earn that back after it's been lapsed? Kind of a 4-step process here. I'll go into slightly more detail. We have a slide for each of these, but this is kind of step-by-step, kind of go down the list. You want to identify who are those donors who have given to you before. We're going to build specific processes. Setting a goal is wonderful, but if we don't have day-to-day tasks and activities that support the goal, it's not about doing a whole bunch of effort. Oh, this is our donor lapsed week. We're going to work so hard this week on getting our lapsed donors back. But what are the actual processes? What are the time slots that we've blocked throughout the whole year to focus on our lapsed donors? Knowing that a new donor may take 7 meetings or 5 meetings or a whole bunch of touch points to get them to give once, where of our lapsed donors, if we just do it right, might take 1 or 2. We know that time for dollars wise, building in those hours to bring back in lapsed donors is huge for us. And the next is actually to implement those, being really disciplined about keeping those hours blocked, saying, you know, on Thursday afternoons from 2 to 3 or from 2 to 4 o'clock, I have a blocked thing on my calendar. It looks like a meeting. I don't schedule things over it. I don't take other calls in that time. And I really do focus on specifically my lapsed donors. And here are the things that we're doing to support that. We'll go over some specifics in a minute. And then the lastly is, how do we make sure we don't have to repeat this work? We know that if we can keep stewardship moving, and we'll talk about some specific stewardship strategies to hopefully not be in this situation again. But how do we do even less work than trying to get back our lapsed donors by keeping them stewarded, informed, and up to date on what they're doing? So in terms of total overall effort, we have at the top of the list, find new donors. That is the most difficult thing times for dollars wise. Right underneath that is reacquiring a lapsed donor. That's second most difficult. And then right at the bottom, the easiest by far is just keeping our existing donors happy. So if we are moving people down this continuum and we have a higher retention rate, and we're doing all the right things with stewardship, we know that in terms of our total time investment and dollars out the door, or dollars in the door rather, we know that that's going to be where we want to focus. So we're trying to move everyone down that. So we're going minimum effort for maximum dollars out, because we probably don't have the staff to do all of it. So in terms of identifying, first place we would go, obviously, is donor reports. This is super easy if you have NXT or Donor Perfect, or even if you use Salesforce, or if you're brand new and you have an Excel spreadsheet of everyone who's given, whatever method of reporting that you have, pull those reports and say, okay, out of all of our donors, let's look at the timestamps and let's sort through the ones who haven't given to us at all in the last 12 months. We tried as much as we can to start with the most recent ones first and then go backwards. If we're like, oh, this person hasn't given us since 1973, it's like, we don't even know if that person is alive yet. Let's start with 2019 donors who haven't done anything. Let's start with 2020 donors who haven't given anything. A wonderful spot to do this. A lot of us had a kind of an influx of cash for COVID relief. COVID relief was a very popular thing. A lot of you from our clients participated in this, and it was kind of a one-off, one-time gift. Those are wonderful ones to recapture, but we do have to demonstrate impact. And thank you for helping us getting through the pandemic, and we couldn't be together, but you were able to keep our mission going and our needs were still there and you were a part of that, things like that. So start with the most recent first and just kind of work your way backwards. And say you're blocking 2 hours a week to do this. You can just go down the list, start with 10, the following week, do the next 10, following week, do the next 10, and on down. The next is event listings. And those of you who have been with Pride for long enough know how we feel about fundraising events, especially with their margins these days. It costs about 50 cents to raise $1 for fundraising events. So we try to have as few as possible. And sophisticated fundraising programs actually have 0 fundraising events. But if you do have them, that's a wonderful prospect list for you. It's a soft ask. They may give a couple $100 for a gala ticket. They may bid on an item, but they're not really engaged with your charity. They're just going to this event because they thought the gala might be cool. The midwinter ball might be cool. That's fine. as long as we have their contact information and we have a chance to follow up with them, they are still considered a lapsed donor. Sometimes we don't think about our one-time, our one-off event attendees or our one-off businesses who sponsor an event and don't engage with us after that as a lapsed donor, but they are. They gave to us one time and they're not giving to us now. And that's the definition of a lapsed donor. So going down that list is a wonderful gold mine of people who already know what you are, already know what your mission is, have already given something in the past, have demonstrated some level of wanting to be a part of the community. So in terms of an ideal prospect profile, they go right to the top of the list already. It's so much easier to recapture one of those than to find a brand new donor. So definitely go through those lists after you've already gone through your donor reports and walked through all of the different lists of people who have given recently. The last is major donors list. Now, we already recommend at Pride that you spend 80+% of your time on major gifts because we know that's where the money is and that's where you're going to make the biggest financial impact and the biggest impact for your mission. So if you have someone who's given big in the past or they pledged a big gift over several years, really should be thinking about going to those people first. So as you're reacquiring lapsed donors, you're prioritizing those who have capacity to make the greatest impact on your program. So between these three lists here, we know that we can get a ton of people fall into these categories. It will take us quite a while before we start running out of these. By the time we get through all of three of these lists, it'll probably be enough months later that we have lapsed donors who gave to us a year ago who have now not given again, have not been engaged with, have not been stewarded that we can work on. So this is kind of an ever-ending cycle, but we know time for dollars wise, effort wise, this is by far much, much, much easier than trying to find brand new donors. That's step one, identifying. Next is to talk about your strategy. Now, the first question that I would ask is this process on me as the staff person, or can I spread this around to my volunteers? If I have those committees built out for special gifts, annual gifts, business gifts, is this something that I can task them with and say, hey, y'all, listen, I got some good news. You're not going to have to go find a bunch of new people. We have a list of people who have already given to us in the past. They're already excited. They know who we are. They may even know who you are. And when you call them and say, hey, I'm calling from the so-and-so foundation, they're like, oh my gosh, yes, I know who that is. We went to an event back in the year. Whatever happened to them? What are you guys up to? So we know these conversations are easy and they're great ones to hand off to our volunteers. So the first thing we want to do, obviously, is if we can get an in-person meeting with them. Sometimes it's a soft ask. Hey, I know you gave a gift to us in 2019. It was a pretty generous gift, actually, $5,000, $10,000, whatever it is. Can I take you to lunch and update you on all the wonderful things we've been able to do since you've been given? We finished up our campaign late 2020, somehow managed to do it in the pandemic, and we're well into the implementation part of that. I'd love to share some of the wonderful things that we've been able to accomplish. Can I take you to coffee? Can I take you to lunch? Most people say, yeah, sounds great. I want to hear about what my gift did. I want to hear about what the impact was of that. The next tier down is, if you're not able to do that, is a phone call. I was in a committee meeting Wednesday night with a nonprofit that I volunteer for, and we just pulled up their entire lapsed donors list. And we said, okay, everybody, what we're going to do is we're going to put everyone on mute. We're on Zoom. We're going to put everyone on mute. Everyone's going to pull up this Google sheet, and you're going to put your name next to 10 people that you know. I mean, this list was like hundreds of donors long, donors of the last 3 years who had not been re-engaged. And as soon as you get to 10, just look up, and when we know you're done, it took us about 2 or 3 minutes. And we kind of got through the list, all the volunteers did, and say, okay, great. We're going to meet again 1 month from now. In that time, I need everyone that you know that you put your name next to, we're going to call them and we're going to ask them to re-up their gift at that same level, not increase their giving, but it's been a couple of years. Say, I saw you give a gift of $1,500, $2,500 back in 2020 for the pandemic. We'd love to have you consider that gift at the same level again this year. You're going to get a lot of no's, you're going to get some yeses, but because there's 12 of us in the room and we each pick 10 names, in a month, that's 120 donors that we just re-engaged with. It's really, really powerful. And for me to make 10 phone calls in a month, that's not hard. And most of them are really positive too. So for all of us to jump all in and use our volunteers in that way, even though it's not as good as a one-on-one meeting, going through and making those phone calls, you're going to get slightly more yeses than you would at like a true telemarketing campaign because they already know who you are. You can share updates about the organization and about the fundraising. The last is, it may be worth considering sending a targeted mailing. Now, we know that mailings are quote unquote successful if we get a 0.5% return or more, total people wise. So if you send out 200 letters and you get one person to return that letter with a gift, it usually will at least pay for itself. And on top of that, you get a little bit of branding, marketing interaction where you can have the donor see something that you're doing. So even if they don't give a gift, they go, oh yeah, that's cool. I remember giving to them. Oh, neat. They're doing this and this and this now. We know that mailings that are targeted and specific will get as much as 10 times that. You might get 5% back. So out of those 200 letters that you sent out, you may get 10 gifts in the mail. We know that that's financially worth it. So looking at your lapsed donors list, if you have good addresses and they're kind of within the last 3 to 5 years, it might be worth sending 1,000 or sending 500 out and just seeing a targeted campaign and having the language actually reflect a targeted campaign as well, not dear donor or dear constituent, but address them by name and saying, we understand that you gave us a gift back in 2019. Here's some of the wonderful things we were able to do with it. We would love to have you consider a gift of the same size this year. We've attached a form if you'd like to fill out, mail a check, or you can scan the QR code and go to our website and give a gift in that way. So that's the least personal, but sometimes the least time-consuming version and way to kind of do that. So as you're thinking about your strategy, not necessarily to do one of these or all of these, but think about what will be most effective for your specific situation and try to integrate some combination of these with also using your volunteer teams to help you do it. So that's strategy. Okay, so you got your strategy in place. Next, we're actually going to implement who does what, how will they do it, when will they do it, and what is the ultimate goal. So when I talk about goal setting, I really mean to be very, very specific about percentages, saying, okay, we have identified on our series of lists 722 donors who in the last 10 years have given to us and not given a second time. Of those 722, we would love to capture 10%. We want 73 people or 72 people of that list to give another gift. That means we have to send out this many over this much time frame. We need this many phone calls. We're going to try to get in front of this many people. So to set really specific kind of analytical style numbers to it. We know that fundraising is very much a relationship business, but as much as we can to walk through and have these really dialed in numbers and give ourselves a reasonable time frame. Say, and we're going to do it over 6 months because I truly only have 2 hours a week to dedicate to this task. And we only have 3 committee meetings in that time. So one is going to be just explaining the thing. And the second one is a check-in. And the third one, they might have done it. So we're going to give ourselves those 6 months and we want to capture 10% or 20%. Set a number that you find realistic and you can kind of check in how you go. So the next thing obviously is as you're implementing this to learn and try to improve the process because it's going to be customized. It's going to be unique to your organization. There's no perfect formula for that. But as those begin to come in, report back saying, of our in-person meetings, 75% of them decided to come back and be a donor again this year. That seemed worth it. Of the phone calls, we only got 2%. That did not feel worth it. Of the mailing, it did okay. It got 2.5%. It's slightly better than a generic mailing, but for the amount of effort, it's kind of neutral. So to go and kind of look at those specific mediums and say which of these was worth it, which of these was the highest performing, we're going to work through that medium again, as many of our donors as we possibly can. Try to set a specific meeting to talk about just lapsed donors, saying, great, we're going to implement some of these things on July 17th. We're all going to get together as a team again. And the purpose of this hour is to walk through and evaluate how we've done so far and also see if we need to adjust anything. And then based on kind of your trial run, you're able to develop kind of a year-long annual plan and saying, okay, of the things that we tried, it is so clear that this version of this type of communication is the best for us personally as the charity to reacquire these lapsed donors. Here's what we're going to do for the next 8 to 10 months to make it work. And on top of that, we're going to have a quarterly check-in meeting that is lapsed donor specific to see how we're doing. We're going to involve our volunteer leaders in that as well to make sure that they're on board and kind of move forward from there. So that's our recommendation on how to kind of work through the process. The more detailed you can be as possible and the more time you can spread it over, the easier it's going to be. We know we have a busy schedule. We probably can't add more new things or at least a lot of more new things to what we're doing as development people. But we can block out a couple hours a week because we know it's going to be better served than trying to find new donors. So if you want specific action steps, if all that seems really complex, at least do these things, at least do these 3 things. The first is a stewardship calendar. I'm going to go in a little more detail on that here at the end. But the second is block time. Like seriously, like put it on your iCalendar, put it on your Google Calendar, put it on Outlook, whatever it might be, but pick a time that is recurring each week, set a recurring meeting for yourself and block that time to do it because we know in those 2 hours, you will make a lot more money than you would spending the exact same time doing the exact same things for people who don't know you. So block that time, be really disciplined, pick a short, reasonable amount of time. Like I said, 2 hours might be too much, maybe an hour, but do it every single week for 6 months and see where you are. And the last is kind of identify and execute that recovery plan that you kind of plan out in advance. What is our strategy? Where do we want to be in 6 months? And then hopefully, once you kind of get into the rhythm of this and your stewardship action plan is in place, again, of the three, the least time consuming, the least difficult, that will get you to where you need to be in the future. So speaking of stewardship plan, Pride has developed this, what we call the 7 touches stewardship plan. It was about 10 years ago, based on the research and idea that it takes an average of 5 to 7 meaningful interactions for a donor to give a second time. This is just based on kind of overall data that we have from wealth engines and from companies that, like Blackbaud, that own these softwares and can do surveys. They said, it takes about 5 to 7 interactions based on what we're seeing, what people are inputting into the computers to do that. So we're saying, great, we're going to go on the high end of that. We're going to try to get 7 meaningful interactions per year with all of our donors. And you go, wait, that's way too many people. Too many donors. Well, that's a great problem to have. That is fine. So we're going to start top down. We're going to start with our biggest donor financially and get down as far as we can. We do our top 50. Can we do our top 100 and see if we can get 7 meaningful interactions? This does not mean like they are subscribed to the email newsletter and they get that from us. This is like a personal handwritten note, a thank you phone call around Thanksgiving, a lunch. You sit down with them at one of your special events and talk to them. So something that is one-on-one-ish, or at least personalized, and makes them feel like they're getting private attention from the charity, from the development department, from the CEO, from a volunteer, whomever. So we try to have these categories. We just set up an Excel sheet. Sometimes you can do this within your donor software, but sometimes it's easier just to have a Google sheet that everyone has. So what are the 7 things? How often are we spreading it out the year? Doing 7 interactions before March and saying, woo, we got all of our stewardship out of the way for the year. Doesn't quite work. It'd be like doing all of your workouts in the first week of every month and then being on the couch for 3 weeks. You're not going to get in shape doing that. So you have to spread them out throughout the calendar year. Who's responsible? It shouldn't necessarily fall just on the staff. Do our top 10 donors get a handwritten letter from the CEO every year? Wouldn't that be wonderful? What are the things we need to implement that? Does it have to be an event? Do we need to get marketing involved for a mass email that invites them to a thing? And what are the different impact points we have? One of the templates that we use is this one here. It's, again, just straight down the list. Here are your donors' names. You can put as many as you possibly can on here. Did they get a face-to-face visit? Did they get a connection at an event? Did they get a phone call around Thanksgiving thanking them, or a spring thank you? Was there some sort of recognition item that they got? Did they get a handwritten note or an impact note, meaning a note that says, here are the wonderful things that your gift did specifically? Did they get a personalized mailing? Now that's 7 exactly right there. You may not have those precise 7. You may even repeat some of them, like 2 phone calls at 2 different times of the year. That's totally fine. But hopefully you're checking those boxes all the way across the board. Because if you invest just a little bit of time in stewardship, you hopefully won't be in the situation where you need to recover those donors. So communication always equals retention. Again, when people give to your organization, they're not saying that they have too much money or they believe in what you do and they want to be a part of it. That's what a gift indicates, saying, hey, I think the mission that your charity has is really neat and I want to be involved in that somehow. So when they give a gift, the thing that they are really asking for is just to be involved, to stay in communication with what everything is going on, how that gift is being spent, how you're growing, how you're serving people. And if you can keep people informed, that conversation for the next gift is great. Otherwise, the issue is if you call someone once a year and all you do is ask for money on that one time that you interact with them, you're like, oh, Jake's calling again. I wonder what he wants. He only calls when he wants one thing. And so you're not gonna take that call. But if you're used to like, oh my gosh, when Jake calls, he's always calling me to tell me about something awesome that they're doing or thank me and tell me how awesome I am. I love being told how awesome I am. Yes, I'm absolutely gonna take that call. So then on call number 8 or 9, the following calendar year, of course they're gonna take your call. And when you ask for that, can you renew your gift? They're like, yeah, this has been great. I've loved being involved with y'all. And it's been so much better than some of the other charities where I've given a gift and it feels like I'm just a number. So we'll leave you with one quote here. This is from Bill Gates, another Bill Gates quote. Your most unhappy customers are your greatest source of learning. So sometimes the people who are upset with us or left us for a specific reason are the people who are the best to talk to. We focus on the good a lot, but to identify some of the places that we're not doing a good job or we're not communicating effectively, we can learn a lot more from that than we can from the things that we're doing well. So challenge just to leave you all with in closing here is you probably have a donor that's been unhappy with you at some point. Reach out to them and just say, hey, I was thinking about you. Here's some of the things we're doing this year. Wanted to hear what you thought. I just want your opinion. If you ask someone's opinion, they're much more likely to engage with you than if you're asking for a gift each time. So with that, we'll certainly take questions at this time, and we'll just kind of go from there. So I know that was a lot of information in just a few minutes, but trying to get everybody out of here on time.
Jake, I think too, to put some of this in context of the current economy, I think, in some ways we get pretty concerned when we have these downturns that it's really going to hurt giving. And to put the context of how important this is right now, and probably for the foreseeable future, when we have economic downturns, a couple of things happen from giving. Number one, most of the reduction in giving comes at the national level. Your national organizations, people, when they start making decisions about what not to support, tends to be more the national organizations rather than the local community organizations. Fortunately, I think just about everybody on this call today represents a community-based organization. So not to panic necessarily about the market, but I think the second thing is your top donors are your least affected by these downturns in the economy. People who have significant wealth are not overly concerned about changes in interest rates. They're not overly concerned about transitory variations in the stock market. They're well diversified, and they're still going to continue to give. And that reinforces where giving is going anyway, which is a great deal of focus on your top donors. We may have longer term pledges, and that's fine. Somebody said, well, I can't pay this off right away in cash. It might take me 2 or 3 or even 4 or 5 years. It's their money. It's when we get a pledge, we know people are going to pay those off. I think the other thing, the opportunity we have is in the planned gift area where people are making gifts of assets rather than income. We have real opportunities, I think, during these times. And I think, and then specifically in this area of stewardship, to pay attention to those donors. We saw this during the pandemic, where we had great success reaching out to people, talking about how they were doing, checking in with them. And when it came time to give, we saw a tremendous upswing in giving by many people toward the end of 2020 because we had been in touch with people and doing all the things that Jake talks about in terms of communication. And also the opportunity to focus more and put more emphasis on your annual giving, entry-level giving programs. When we see economic downturns, it tends to be our mid-level donors where we get our most affected. Our annual giving programs tend to stay fairly strong. Our signature gift level programs tend to stay fairly strong. So putting emphasis on that, and whether by coincidence or design, we want to think design. Next week, we do have as our major point of discussion during our academy next week is on donor pipeline and stewardship. So looking forward to those of you who are going to be joining us in Charleston next week for that program. And then in August, we do have the annual gifts and special events program academy that we're hosting in Destin, Fort Walton Beach, Florida in August. So again, a chance to really make a difference in the annual giving program. And that's a particular focus when we do have economic downturns. We know we have to put a little extra effort into that. So just some things there to put it in context. Nobody likes the fact that the economy is not doing well and we may be heading into a more difficult time, but there are things that we can do and focus to continue to be successful as we go forward. So just a few words there. Back to you, Jay.
Yeah. Absolutely. And before I close here on the last slide, want to recognize our own April Brantham for earning her CFRE. Very, very impressive. Very, very proud. Congratulations, April. I know you're not on camera, but I hope you can hear us. We are really, really excited. Good. I'm glad. I know that's a ton of work, and I know that test is not easy. So congratulations very much so.